Today on CJ Off-Road, we're going to lift our two-door JL Wrangler. We've just got our brand new two-door JL Wrangler in, and in order to ditch these factory wheels and tires, we're going to need a little bit of a lift. We're going to use the help of rough country and get started. If you want to get your JL up in the air 2.5 inches and do it really easily, today we're going to be checking out this rough country 2.5 inch spacer lift fitting your brand new 2018 JL 2-door and 4-door Wrangler. This spacer lift is an easy way to get your JL Wrangler up in the air without breaking the bank. It includes everything that you need: coil spacers, extended sway bar links, even shock relocation brackets, utilizing your factory equipment. It's going to make it ride really nicely as well as allow you to articulate out on the trail on a budget. Now with that being said, we're going to get this installed on our 2018 JL Wrangler 2-door. Tools you need for this installation: 3/8 inch ratchet, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 3/4 inch socket, 10mm box wrench, 15mm box wrench, 18mm box wrench, 19mm box wrench, a 6mm Allen key, and a lift or a jack and jack stands. Our JL is up on the lift, and as you can tell, we've got the wheels and tires already removed. Now you can do this with a jack and jack stands, however it's much easier on a lift and easier for you guys to see. The disassembly process is going to start with the sway bar links. Let's move on to the front and get started. You're going to use an 18mm socket to get both the bottom and the top bolts and nuts off. You're going to retain this hardware as you're going to use it when you put the new sway bar links on, so let's get them removed. What I'm going to do, that way I don't mix them up, is put them back into the sway bar link. Just get them snugged up. Then we'll work on this top bolt. Then repeat the same process on the other side for that sway bar link. Use an 18mm box wrench with an 18 socket to get the lower shock bolts off. In order to let the brake line and the ABS line droop, we're going to remove this 15mm bolt right here on the control arm, as well as the 10mm bolt holding on this bracket underneath the coil perch. Now we can get the 10mm removed from right up here. Just going to thread that right back into where we pulled it out. We're going to disconnect this pin here for the wiring that disconnects the axle. To use a trim removal tool and get under there, just pop it right out. Then we'll come down here and actually disconnect it from this one as well. Disconnect the plug right here just by pushing down on this, pulling it out. Now we actually use pull jacks to get our axle lowered down and drooped. That's why we removed all those other components. If you're on the ground, what you're going to do is leave the frame up on the jack stands and put a jack under the pumpkin and slowly lower it down. Be careful not to hit your brake rotors on the ground, but you'll get enough clearance that you can pop this spring out. As you can see, we're going to do that right now. Then we can start by installing the new lift kit onto our Jeep. Make sure that you pull this rubber isolator out first. And then what you're going to do is slide the coil spacer up on, just like that. Then put the isolator here. Then we can reinstall our spring. As you can see, we've got our coil spring bump stop spacer here. Now make sure you put it in before you put the coil on, or else you won't be able to fit it through these slats. Let's try and get the coil on now. Place the hardware through the top, and you're going to feel a hole in that coil perch that it's going to drop into. Then we'll use the provided hardware underneath and get it tightened up with a 15mm ratchet and an open-ended box wrench. Reinstall this 10mm bolt onto this brake line bracket that you previously removed, and then go ahead and get it tightened up. Doesn't need to be anything crazy, it's just holding on this small bracket. After we do this, we're going to get these shock relocation brackets mounted onto here. We're going to slide on the front shock mount extension bracket by putting it this way. Put it through the top like that with the washer. Then underneath is going to get the flange lock nut. I'm just going to tighten that up to where it stops, and then what we're going to do is actually get everything mounted up here loosely. That way we're not missing anything and we're not over tightening it and getting this thing off camber here. We're just going to go ahead and leave it loose and get the shock into it. We're going to use the provided crush sleeve here. Go right in between the shock brackets and actually use that factory hardware to go through here. Put the nut on the backside. Like we've been doing, just get it snugged up, and then we're going to use the included hardware to use this shock mount and get into this top bracket. We're going to tighten on this lower bolt here now that we have this installed. It's going to use a 9/16 box wrench and a 9/16 ratchet below. Put this 15mm bolt back onto this control arm bracket for the brake lines and ABS lines and get it tightened up. Put the included hardware through this top mount. Your washer and your flange lock nut on the back side. Then we can come back and get everything tightened down, including this one and this top shock bolt. We're going to put our sway bar links on. We're going to reconnect this axle disconnect actuator by plugging it back in, then pushing this white tab. And it's fully seated into there. I'm not going to worry about putting the tabs back onto the control arm mount. This is just going to give us some more flex and some more reassurance underneath here. Everything's tightened up now, so we can move on to the rear. Now that the front's all buttoned up, it's time to move on to the rear. We're going to tackle the lower shock mounts as well as the sway bars. Let's get started. The lower part of the shock mount is going to use two 18mm ratchets or wrenches to get it loose. Make sure you hang on to the shock hardware. I like to put it back into the lower mount here. Now we're going to tackle the sway bar links using that same 18mm socket and ratchet wrench. We're going to save this lower hardware as well to use on our new sway bar links. We're going to use an 18mm ratchet wrench along with a 6mm Allen key to get this off. Then remove the sway bar link. Put your bump stop spacer up into place using the included 9/16 hardware. Then we use the provided flange nut underneath. Get it started. Same for the rear. Now go ahead and lower your rear axle. Make sure you don't have any binding. And the coil springs will come right out. To put the rear coil spacer on, we're going to grab this washer with the welded on nut over top of our upper coil perch. Place the provided 2-inch hardware through this spacer. I think you're going to have to look for it and find it a little bit before you can tighten it up with a 3/4 inch ratchet. Now we're going to reinstall the spring with the coil spring isolator at the top. Just like that, it's fully installed. Now we can get our sway bar links and our shock extension brackets on. Now we're going to install our extended sway bar links. Use the provided hardware up top and the factory hardware down below. Tighten the lower bolt using an 18mm ratchet wrench and an 18mm socket, or 2 ratchet wrenches like we have here. Place the lower shock extension bracket over the original post. Then install the provided hardware down through. Use the factory shock bolt to go through this lower part with the sleeve installed. Now don't tighten anything down, just like the front, until you've got it all installed. Now we're going to pick up on our axle a little bit to get that shock mounted up. Now we're going to go back and tighten everything down. This side's all buttoned up. Make sure to repeat the same process on the other side, and that's going to complete your installation. Well, as you can see, we just wrapped up the installation of this rough country 2.5-inch spacer lift on our 2018 JL Wrangler. There's a lot more distance in between our tire and our fender flare, even with these 35-inch mud claws wrapped on a black Rhino Armory wheel. Now we went up in the air, plus we increased our articulation all within about 3 hours. You can do this in your driveway or on a lift with simple hand tools. To find this lift kit, as well as many other great parts for your JL, be sure to check out cjponyparts.com. Hope you enjoyed that video. To stay up to date on our CJ Off-Road videos, make sure to subscribe up top here, and for any other installs, make sure to click the link right above.